one of the things that has come out ever since it was announced that Around the Horn was ending, and it was said by, unfortunately, a former Around the Horn panelist, Jemele Hill,
Yeah.
is that when he said that Around the Horn was ending because it was too woke. And we
Yeah.
know woke has become this catch-all phrase that people have weaponized to mean either things they don't like, or frankly, in my mind, I'll say it because now that we're on my platform, I mean, I could be as petty as I want to, but I think it had a lot to do with the fact that you had diverse voices on the show. Women, women of color, Black men, all kinds of people on there. And suddenly the presence of these people is considered too woke. But nevertheless, how did you feel about Jemele Hill saying that about this show?
Oh, I understand where that's coming from. Of course. I mean, I worked with Jay for 2,000 episodes. I've talked about this a little bit. I'm happy to talk about it here. I was a very young TV host when he was, on this show every single day, and a superstar on this show, and so great. And I don't want to get into the legality of anything because I don't have the words in front of me now exactly what happened. But there are certain, things that have a 28-year-old host control. But I felt all of it. I felt a man whose career was now going away from him, and there's hurt there. And I've tried to reach out with him and have successfully. We've had good conversations over the last 10 years we've been apart, whatever it is, and they would still always end in a place where his hurt was very much his own hurt. And I have to, be aware of that. As far as the criticisms of the show, I mean, I am fine with anyone feeling any way about what's out there. I understand myself, I'm not everybody's cup of tea, but I do know I've had 46 and a half years of walking in this skin around this earth. I get along with everybody, and I want to get along with everybody, and I will work to get along with everybody. I'm a pleaser to a fault. It's put me through therapy for years. I have people in my own family who I disagree with everything they feel on any number of topics, and I love them, and we live together, and that's how I live the world. I don't ask how people vote before we go around the horn. I'm happy to talk about it because I can talk about anything. I don't demand we only talk about one thing in any topic. I'm having a conversation with you, and you want to bring in something else, that's fine. I know we have people whose family are from the military, family are from the police, who have people who voted Republican, voted Democrat. I never really, you could say there's more one way or the other. I'm not counting. I'm just not going to operate or live in that space. You're going to tell me we did 4,953 episodes and 8-10 topics a day, Jemele? What is that? It's 500,000 topics. I mean, if we went to a place that some people didn't like 10 times, that's what, 0.2%, 20 times, 100 times. I've said things I wish I could take back. I'm sure, I've been in moments before where you did the best you could with a very difficult topic. We're not trying to, we're trying to have the best conversation people who are being authentic can have in that one moment. You could say you're not being authentic. I'm being authentic. Ask anybody who knows me. I'm trying to be a 1-to-1 ratio on air and off air. So I recognize the show expanded its roster by my own desire to want to have we needed to be able to talk about women's sports. You cannot tell me the roster we had our first 5 years of the show was best equipped to do that. We needed to be able to talk about, apply it to this was the advent of athletes having more of a voice. Absolutely, we needed to be having a conversation about when an athlete says, like Osaka or Simone Biles are talking about their own mental health and something. Well, okay, I want to have panelists who are maybe more open to do that. Does that now apply it to places that are spaces that are politics for people? I took one episode and I talked about the Special Olympics. This is something that's near and dear to my heart. I've worked it before. I worked it as a kid. This is we grew up. So did that go to a political space for some people? Take it any way you want. Forgive me. I put my heart out there, That's how I see the world. And then that happened 10 of 500,000 episodes, 100 of 500,000 topics. I'm sorry, 50,000. My numbers are all mixed up, but you see what I'm saying. It was such a small percentage.
Yeah.
That I was able to say. It was just such a small percentage. But for somebody else, it was the face of the show. So we just did a show last week, and Kate Fagan used her FaceTime as she sees fit. You know, I'm not muting FaceTimes. I'm just not. So another instance, we talked about the Olympics that were in China. We talked about the Olympics on a sports show. Then the host country, and a conversation played out after that. That's not inventing stories to talk about for the sake of wanting to cudgel in topics that are near and dear to people's hearts. So whenever criticism was made about the show, I felt like I had intention. I knew what I was. I knew how I was born and raised and who my parents are. And I knew, I knew what my intention was. I knew how pure I was. I've worn an ash on TV for 23 years. Does that mean I believe everything the Catholic Church does or doesn't believe? No, I'm my own person. I was raised to be strong about that by my parents or by the Jesuits or by the Christian brothers. But that doesn't mean I defend everything. I'll go out, I'm an Italian-American. I said something bad about Columbus, or I didn't say something bad about Columbus. I said something factual about Columbus, and I don't think I got invited back to the Italian-American Foundation. So be it. No one's going to question, how I feel about things. This was a long answer. I know, Jemele. I'm sorry. I guess what you're hearing is I heard it all. I feel it. But I hope what I'm saying is that's okay. You can feel a certain way. You can have feedback, criticism. I think you'll find that I was a person who lived on social media and addressed criticism back at me in a way that allowed it to be heard and said, yes, I took this criticism. Our roster got too big and we brought in people you didn't like. I can understand that. Now see it from my perspective. I think I'm comfortable in addressing anybody at any moment, whether I did or didn't. I think I am. So I wanted to model to people how you can take criticism. And that was something, even when I responded to, some people we worked with in the past, and it's been very negative. And Mariotti would be an example of that, or have too much edge. And Jason Whitlock would be an example of that. I've worked side by side with Jason for quite some time. He and I have a knowledge of who each other are. If he's going to say things that I think go over a line that come into my space, I'm going to let him know that.
Mm-hmm. And this is why, Tony, you're one of the most well-liked people in the business. You have a universal high approval rating, which is very hard to get in our business. I'll say it is like those criticisms were always intellectually lazy and bullshit, because I know, the way that sometimes people responded, even with Kate, because I shared the FaceTime with her when we were on together, and I thought what she said was amazing. But for people, it's not even about the discussion of these things, which are related to sports.
It's not related to sports. That was, to be fair, that's a FaceTime. So again, I'm not in the muting business. That is incredibly complex. The most complicated story of its kind in our little space of the world, right? In sports, right? Trans youth athletes. I don't think it was professional league and trans athletes in the WNBA versus the Olympics. It wasn't. It was about, as the way she set it up, about 13-year-old kids wanting to feel belonging in high school.
Correct. It was about the transformative power of sports. That was really what that was about.
I think everybody feels and believes. So now she applies it to trans youth, and there are people who feel all sorts of way about that. But it wasn't like a decree that things need to be this way or anything. Like, this is how I feel. So this is how I feel. So we've had other examples in the show. Again, I'll bring it up. I'm not going to reference specifically with the quotes, but we're talking about China hosting the Olympics, and a comment is made about our country in it, and I responded back in kind in a way that said, wait, let's talk about what we're talking about here, and brought it back on point. That's the job of a host. The job isn't necessary to wag a finger or shut somebody out. I know there's a mute button, but in certain topics to shut down a conversation. This is one of the things I struggle with, Jemele, because in my own person, I would never have a mute button in life, ever. I would never shut somebody down. I would, so here I'm on a show, and now you're seeing the ebb and flow. Like, I'm going to shut you down in a conversation about, the GOATs of the NBA. If you bring up Kobe, and I think, it should be about LeBron or Jordan. But I'm not going to be doing that in the next conversation. A viewer might be able to connect those dots, and I'm not scoring this topic. you know, as it became, and as you know, it became with Kaepernick, or it became with, you know, all these. I mean, you're not doing your job if you're not addressing those topics.
Correct.
We
That's
do
what
too much. I mean, were we on in the middle of a pandemic where no sports were happening, and then athletes were positioning conversations that were a little bit different? Yes, I can admit to all this. The topics became harder to come by. You know, not the stories became harder to come by. I'm sorry, the topics became more challenging to discuss. You know, we were thrust more challenging stories, but we were going to try to talk about them like the people with the expertise that we had on the show that day. And that's, you know, I can't say it any other way than we had right intentions, and maybe you would have said they should have hired 6 more panelists from a different part of the country and brought in, you know, 4 more panelists that, you know, were from different, you know, backgrounds. Yeah, I guess we could have. I would like to for the next 10 years of the show elsewhere, you know, but that's where we are.